Welcome to my Airbnb in Roatán, Honduras, an island north of the mainland. Here I am excited to be in the country after a long travel session. I'm here to do some fly fishing, specifically for bonefish and hopefully some permit and tarpon. So I went out and I would fish most of every day with kayaks that I had at my Airbnb. So here I am kayaking around at night. And I spent a lot of time on the kayak, which was pretty necessary here. There's not a whole lot of access to the flats by car, or um, I guess just by car would be mostly how you're getting there unless you have a boat. So having some sort of watercraft is pretty necessary. You can definitely wade some of the flats once you're there, as you'll see me doing here. Here I am casting at some bonefish in this little bucket of sand along the reef. I had a really tough time catching the fish in Roatan. I'm not the most experienced flats fisherman, but I've done a couple of trips now. I think 3 or 4 full week trips. Um, so I feel like I have the basics of what you're trying to do when I'm out there. But I learned a lot here in Roatan. This is actually the first bonefish I hook up to right here. But I end up losing this fish. Probably not a great hook set on it. It was just a small one. Um, the thing that was challenging about Rotan was that the essentially the substrate was either reef, like what I'm standing on now, and here's my hook breaking after I hook a bonefish. That was my second one I lost that day. So you can see that what I'm fishing on is reef, and it's really easy to get snagged. It's also really hard to land fish because they can break you off on the reef really easily. My fly is snagged, and you can see right there, there's like 10 bones approaching me, and then they all spook away. That was kind of the story of the uh, fishing for me. It was getting snagged and spooking fish. Um, Another challenge was that a lot of the flats are covered in turtle grass, like you can see here. And the turtle grass is just another thing to get snagged on. So I'd suggest if you're heading there to do any fishing, bring pretty much exclusively weedless flies. I only had a few going into this trip, and I lost a few of them on fish and broke a few off on the reef. And so yeah, definitely bring weedless flies. I was fishing mostly shrimp. I did see a fair amount of bonefish. Did not see too many permit. This island's known for having fairly good permit fishing. I'm not sure if it was where I was fishing specifically wasn't great. Here I am casting at a school of what I think are parrotfish. So that was another thing that was a challenge on this trip, is that I casted at a lot of tailing fish that were not bonefish from what I know. Um, More snags, getting snagged on rocks, weeds, whatever it be. So I was just paddling around from different flats that I saw on Google Maps, and oh, here I am casting at a permit, but it was quickly gone. I was in the kayak. This is some footage from a water taxi that I used. So on the second day, I booked a water taxi to access some new zones, and it was actually really cool. They had these canals through the mangroves that I would have never known about had I not booked this water taxi. And so I threw my kayak on, and I think this cost $20, and I just gave the guy 20. I think he quoted me at $15 over the phone, but I just gave him a 20 kind of as a tip because I had the kayak. Here's a fish. I don't know what that is. Um, Occasionally, I would stick my GoPro underwater. Here's a trumpet fish. Walking around on the reefs. Some fish, a little hole. I tried to avoid walking on the coral, but it's a little inevitable if you're fly fishing there. A lot of the flats are just connected. Here's a boxfish that I hooked. A lot of these fish that I was seeing, and if you go there, you'll see, are just on the flats and on the reef. Lots of cool reef life. Like there's a conch. Um, some awesome kayaking, although I did get in some waves occasionally. Here's me casting at a bonefish, and I thought I had this one. Right as I cast, it's a good presentation, and a boat comes by, and I think the boat spooked the fish. Um, Here's a eel or sea snake or something. I'm not actually sure what this was. I was just walking and saw it. I thought it was cool. Tried to film it. And so I would wait on the some of the bigger flats as the tide rose, and you could hear crouched down on my knees because I was having a hard time catching the fish. I was trying to be real stealthy and spooking them again. Here's some more footage from the canal that I kind of learned after I used that water taxi. And look at this. The locals would just go so fast through these canals, and I was so worried I was going to get ran over because there's not too many places to pull off. Um, those canals are really cool and well worth discovering because they saved me a lot of paddling time. The flats are kind of disconnected, so I was paddling between them a lot. Here's me doing some snorkeling. I use just some old boots that I'd have worn for a few years as my flats boots. Actually works quite well as long as you can get your neoprene booties into them. So yeah, I found a little snorkel mask in my Airbnb and cleaned it up, and there was some small fins that I could get my feet into, and so I did an afternoon of snorkeling, and it was super fun. If I had done things over, I would have spent a little more time snorkeling. I just didn't really realize I had a mask um, for a day or two. But the reef there is incredible. I just tied my shoes onto this buoy because it's hard to get out into the water and start snorkeling unless you want to jump off a boat, which then I decided that's what I'll do. And so I just tied my kayak with all my fishing stuff and lunch and water to my leg and just snorkeled around like that, which was kind of funny. Going off the edge of the drop off, that was kind of scary. Um, Getting in that deep water. But yeah, the snorkeling was incredible, and I would highly suggest doing that if you're headed to Roatán. Here's some more flats fishing where I'm spooking bonefish all over the flats, catching little guys. I didn't catch any bonefish on my own while there, which I think I fished 3 full days essentially. Two tide cycles each day, or I guess one high and one low. Um, Here's a good tailing fish that you can kind of see on the screen, and then here I got snagged in the fish. Actually, I think right here is where I get snagged. Your fly just gets snagged on the turtle grass. I get snagged, and then the fish bumps into my taut line and it spooks it. That happened occasionally to me, like 2 or 3 times. So just kind of shows how hard it is, and you got to use weedless flies. So on the last day, my fourth day of fishing was my last day. I decided to book a guide. His name was Johnny. He was with Forktail Lodge in Roatán. I was walking around right in front of their operation one day because I was staying on the south side of the island, and he came out and was like, "How's the fishing?" And he basically said he could get me in on the last day, and I was like, "Sweet!" It was only $350, which was an incredible price. Here we are fishing for tarpon, and right here I hook up to a big tarpon. I end up fighting this fish for, I think I had clipped the entire video. Good jump there right off the bat. I fought this fish for like 20 or 25 minutes, I think, with the kind of assist of the boat with Johnny. He would kind of motor the boat a little bit, especially early on in the fight, to kind of help me out. My arm definitely was tired. I just show a few clips of the fish and the fish jumping. This was the biggest fish I've ever landed. This is actually my first tarpon I've ever hooked. I've fished for them in a few places, Mexico and Florida, but this is the first one I've ever hooked on the fly. Good jump here that I got. That was awesome. It's right next to the boat, probably 15 minutes into the fight. Yeah, Johnny was the guide with Forktail Lodge. I highly recommend him. He was super awesome. he put me onto a ton of fish. I caught this big tarpon, which he was saying was probably 60 pounds. I caught another big tarpon that was maybe 40 or 50. Really hard to land these fish. He uh, he kind of had me like just keeping tension, and then he would grab it, and pull it into the boat. And uh, I don't think you're typically supposed to bring fish tarpon that big into the boat, but I think he was kind of impressed by this one. I don't think Roatan has huge tarpon like this too often. I think they're migrating through. That tarpon left a scale behind in the boat, so I grabbed that, which is cool. Here we are, fishing for permit. We're trying to get the Grand Slam. Right here, I spot a tailing permit. I thought I had a really good chance. I made a good cast, had a big shrimp on. Thought I had a pretty decent chance at it, but it's hard, and I kind of just lost track of where that fish went. And then I saw it kind of spooking away and threw another kind of Hail Mary, but he was gone. We did see a few more permit that day with the guide. Here I am catching some bonefish. First one of the trip, actually, which is kind of funny seeing as I fished for him for 3 days and seen probably 50 of them at this point. Here's a little jack, maybe. I'm not sure what that was. Some more bonefish. I was just blind fishing, kind of blind casting into a bone fishing mud, essentially. The first time I've really just done that. Definitely not as exciting, but still fun to hook and play them because they fight hard. Just using that same big shrimp that I was fishing for the permit. And then later, I actually end up catching a big tarpon on that shrimp. So it kind of just goes to show there's a small barracuda on that shrimp. Here's me fishing that shrimp again for tarpon or really whatever. And big tarpon, the second big tarpon I landed that day takes it. So tie up some big shrimp. They're basically the one one fly does all type of flats fly. You can catch bonefish, permit, huge tarpon, jack, snook. I did hook a snook. Um, Blind fishing. Here's that second tarpon, another big one for sure. Johnny was great. We caught two big tarpon. I hooked a snook but lost it. That's a good shot of that fish. I landed 12 bones, I think, with him, and then a bunch of smaller random species, cuda and a bunch of little guys. So it was super cool. Two biggest fish I've ever caught were those tarpon. Incredible country. Here I'm headed back. I'd love to get back there, especially for some snorkeling. It's a really cool place. The boat rides are pretty rough, though, I will say. If you're not used to that, try to be prepared in some way. And then, yeah, just a little time lapse eating a mango. I had a bunch of good fresh mangoes and fruit there. So hope to be back. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something.